Energy Media readers, you'll know that we do a lot of work around the adoption, sales, and so on with electric vehicles, because that's all part of the transition away from fossil fuels eventually. And so one of our favorite EV analysts is Sam Abou-Samid from Guidehouse Research now. So welcome to the interview, Sam.
Glad to be with you again, Markham.
And today we're going to be talking about a new report that Guidehouse has published around where the light duty EVs are at, sales numbers, and so on. So, Sam, how do you compare 2018 sales, which I understand were like 2.2 million globally, and then they increased by about 1 million in 2019? Have I got that correct?
That's about right. And we're expecting. Well, let's put it this way: prior to the current situation that we're in, the current health crisis that we're in, we were projecting those sales to continue climbing throughout the 2020s, eventually reaching overall for all electrified or all high voltage electrified vehicles, hitting about 25 million by the end of the decade. And that includes includes hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery electric vehicles.
Gotcha. Now, you and I, the last time we spoke, GM had unleashed its, it had announced its Ultium platform with the Ultium battery, which is really, in my mind, quite a significant step forward in terms of electric vehicle technology. And from in my studies of technology adoption, usually when you get a significant step change like that, that's when you really begin to see the technology get a foothold in the market and growth accelerates. Can we expect that with EVs? Is that what you were expecting during the 2020s?
Yeah, we were expecting, as the cost of EVs continues to come down, and we also continue to build out the infrastructure to support EVs, to make it more convenient for people to drive them and reduce the friction involved in owning and driving an EV. We expected sales to continue to climb progressively, because they were becoming more affordable, more available, more models on the market, in more market segments. Because the other thing to consider right now, in addition to the cost, is that you've had a fairly limited selection of vehicles to choose from, of the vehicle types that are available. Mostly sedans, a couple of crossovers, but we're starting to get into more sizes and shapes of EVs to choose from, with more capability and that are going to be more appealing to customers. But of course, now we've hit this a little more than a speed bump in the road, and the forecasts that we have in this report that was just published earlier today is based on what our vehicle forecast was. We finalized the forecasts about a month and a half ago, actually, before the real impact of the pandemic really started to be known. And we've since published another report that does some updates on our forecasting, taking into account the EV, or we're taking into account the effects of the pandemic and the economic situation. And so, at least for the next couple of years, we actually expect sales to decline from where they were in 2019.
Yeah, I have a little hypothesis, and I'd like to get your view on it if you don't mind. And I think we're seeing changes in consumer behavior that are more significant and happening sooner than I had expected, say 2 or 3 years ago. People are kind of rethinking their personal mobility model. For instance, you might have a family of 4 that says, look, we commute with one vehicle. We'll get an electric vehicle for commuting because that has all sorts of cost advantages for us. But we do like to, grandma lives 300 miles away, and we do need a bigger vehicle that can go that distance. So we'll have one gas vehicle. And you're starting to see electric bikes. People are rethinking how they get around. And are you noticing the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, that rethinking has even accelerated in the last month or so. One of the things that we're expecting is a shift away from shared mobility. Shared mobility has been gaining a lot of traction in the last 5 to 10 years. And we actually expect some of that to shift away based on what's happening right now. But also, another major factor in what's going on right now, because we're seeing this um, huge, this unprecedented experiment in remote working, we might actually see people driving less. And so there's, there's going to be less wear and tear on vehicles. That's going to slow down the replacement cycle. And we may see people deciding that, they maybe don't need quite as many vehicles. We think a significant proportion of the workforce that's working from home right now may continue to do that on a permanent basis after this pandemic subsides. And so you're probably going to see fewer people commuting. So that could in fact help EV sales. Um, at least once the economy starts to pick up again, because people may not need to drive as far, they may decide things like, maybe we don't need three vehicles in a household, maybe we can get by with two if one of one of the people in the household is not commuting anymore.
Another trend that I thought would show up earlier, but yeah, I think you guys are forecasting that it'll start showing up in this year or next year, is the 48-volt hybrid. And has been flagged by other studies that I've read as being a big contributor to reduced gasoline demand and oil demand on the internal combustion engine side. So increases fuel efficiency basically by a significant amount. Can you give us a quick overview of what that technology is and what you're expecting for the 2020s?
Yeah, so most current conventional vehicles have a 12-volt electrical system. And so that kind of limits what you can do in terms of electrifying subsystems in the vehicles. We've seen a couple of manufacturers, most prominently Fiat Chrysler and Audi, launch some 48-volt systems here in North America. Also, Mercedes-Benz, I forgot them. They've launched some vehicles with 48-volt electrical systems. The advantage there is that you can, with a 48-volt starter generator, now you have the ability to expand the range of operation for things like automatic stop-start. So now, instead of waiting until the vehicle comes to a complete stop to shut off the engine, you can shut it off at, say, 5 to 7 kilometers an hour, and then actually get the vehicle rolling up to 2 to 3 kilometers an hour before you restart the engine, depending on how long the stop is. You can also keep the engine off longer. You get some brake energy recovery. It's stored in a small lithium-ion battery, and you can start to electrify other systems in the vehicle, like coolant pumps and oil pumps and air conditioning, with a 48-volt electrical system, because now you have, instead of 2 to 2.5 kilowatts of electrical power from a 12-volt system, you have 10 to 12 kilowatts available. So vehicles like the Jeep Wrangler, the new Jeep Wrangler, the Ram 1500, both have 48-volt systems available. Many of the new Audi vehicles launched in the last 2 years have 48-volt systems in them, a couple of Mercedes, and lots more in Europe as well.
Now, you're an automotive engineer by training, so maybe you can explain to me how this works. But the descriptions I've read of the 48-volt hybrid system is that this new starter generator motor that's attached to the internal combustion engine also helps with propulsion, gives you more torque, and increases fuel efficiency anywhere from 10 to 20%. So how does that work exactly?
Yeah, basically the same way that any other hybrid would work, but on a smaller scale. So, the most basic 48-volt systems, you have the starter generator that essentially takes the place of the traditional alternator. It's driven by the belt, on the serpentine belt on the front of the vehicle, on the front of the engine. And then, there's other configurations as well where you can have the motor packaged between the engine and transmission. In either case, that energy that you've recovered during braking, that regenerative braking energy that's stored in the battery, can then also be used to feed back in to the engine to reduce some of the load so that you don't have to use as much gas. So, for example, when you're accelerating, you can use that 48-volt system to add a little bit of extra torque when you're climbing up a slight hill or just accelerating from a stop. In the case of the Ram 1500 pickup, for example, that 48-volt system adds an extra 130 foot-pounds of torque to the V8 engine, to the Hemi V8, and on the V6, I think it's 90 foot-pounds. So it's a significant amount of torque boost that you can get, that just reduces the overall workload on the engine.
Well, Sam, last question here. How in the next year or so, maybe two, while the where economy is getting back on its feet and we're all recovering from this financially, um, what's do you think is going to happen with electric vehicle sales? I mean, on the one hand, I've seen lots of projections that say, well, we're going to see a drop by 40 or 50% in sales. And on the other hand, other people are saying, you know what? This is a chance for a whole new reset of how we approach energy and how we design cities and so on. And we should take advantage of that and start to phase out, you know, internal combustion engines like some of the European cities are planning to do. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the latter, while it might be desirable, is I think an unfortunately very optimistic scenario given what we expect the economic conditions to be over the next couple of years. More likely, our current projection is that EV sales will be down about 5 to 10% compared to 2019, and about 30% below what we had forecast prior to the pandemic, because we were forecasting a pretty significant increase. So about 30% off of that number. Realistically, the economy, we're likely to have such high unemployment, at least well into 2021, that nobody's going to be buying much of anything, EV or otherwise. And when people are in dire economic straits, they're not going to be going out and spending a premium on EVs. If anything, they're going to keep the vehicles they have for a longer period of time.
Fair enough, Sam. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to chatting with you about EVs again in the very near future.
Happy to join you as always, Markham.